She was a virgin housekeeper, and he the man who always had everything until her. A passion that shouldn't exist but that cannot be ignored. The price of their love will be higher than anyone could imagine. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening to this beautiful story from. We continue. The sound of Helen's shoes echoed across the cold marble of the Wellington Towers lobby in the heart of Park Avenue. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the city was still asleep as she arrived for another day of work. The 40-story building rose like a monument of glass and steel, reflecting the first lights of the New York dawn. Helen Smith was 25 years old and had been working as a cleaner in the building for 3 years. She knew every corridor, every office, every corner of that place that represented everything she would never be: power, wealth, influence. But there was something about that environment that fascinated her, even knowing she didn't belong there. She had grown up on the outskirts of New York City, in the East Bronx, raised by her grandmother Mary, after her mother died in a car accident when Helen was just 8 years old. Grandma Mary was a strict, devout evangelical woman who always said that work gives a man dignity and that Helen should be grateful to have an honest job. On that March morning, as she prepared her cleaning supplies, Helen heard the private elevator open on the ground floor. It was 6 o'clock, far too early for any executive to show up at the building. She peered over the reception desk and saw an imposing figure cross the lobby. Arthur Wellington was 35 years old and was the owner of one of the largest business groups in the country. Heir to a fortune built over 3 generations, he commanded businesses ranging from agribusiness to technology. Tall, with broad shoulders, brown hair always perfectly cut, and piercing blue eyes, Arthur had a presence that intimidated even the most seasoned executives. Helen watched him from a distance, as she always did. There was something about him that both disturbed and attracted her. Perhaps it was the way he carried power on his shoulders, or how his eyes seemed to see right through people. She had never exchanged more than a polite greeting with him, but she felt as if he knew her in some way. Arthur stopped in front of the elevator and for the first time in 3 years looked directly at Helen. Their eyes met for a moment that felt like an eternity. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched her with an intensity that made her heart race. Then the elevator doors closed, taking him to the top floor. Helen stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Her hands trembled as she held the cleaning cloth. There was something in that look that had stirred her in a way she couldn't explain. Over the following days, she began to notice things that had previously gone unnoticed. Arthur started arriving at work earlier, always at the same time she was in the lobby. He would greet her with a subtle nod of his head, and she would respond in kind, but she felt there was a silent communication between them. Helen began to take more care with her appearance for work. Not that she had much to work with. Her wardrobe consisted of 3 navy blue uniforms and a few simple outfits for the weekends. But she started combing her brown hair differently, letting a few loose curls frame her face. She started wearing the lipstick a co-worker had given her for Christmas, even though she knew she would spend most of the day wearing a mask. One April morning, while cleaning the glass of the entrance hall, Helen heard footsteps approaching. She turned and found Arthur standing a few feet away from her. He was wearing an impeccable navy blue suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning, Helen," he said, and his deep voice made something stir in her stomach. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "You always arrive early?" "Yes, sir, I like to start the day when it's still quiet." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. "And how did you end up here?" The question caught her by surprise. Executives like him didn't ask personal questions of employees like her. "I need to work." "Sir, this is a good job." "How long have you been working here?" 3 years. "And before?" Helen hesitated. She wasn't used to talking about her life to strangers, much less to the owner of the building where she worked. "I worked for a smaller cleaning company. I cleaned houses." Arthur nodded, but she got the impression that he already knew that. "Do you live far from here?" "In the East Bronx." The answer came out automatically, and she immediately regretted it. Why was she telling him this? 2 hours on public transit to get here. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. How did he know that? It's worth it, Helen said, trying to end the conversation and returning to cleaning the glass. Why? The question made her stop again. She turned to him, noticing he hadn't moved an inch. What do you mean? Why is it worth it? 2 hours to get here, 2 hours to get back, a salary that barely pays the bills? Why is it worth it? Helen felt her face flush. There was something in the way he spoke, as if he were testing her. Because I have dignity, Mr. Wellington, and honest work is always worth it. For the first time she saw a small smile form on his lips. Interesting. What's interesting? You. The word hung in the air between them. Most of the people who work here complain about the salary, the hours, the conditions. You don't. Complaining doesn't change anything. And what does? Helen faced him. There was something dangerous about this conversation, but she couldn't stop. Hard work, persistence, not giving up. Arthur took a step closer. Now he was near enough for her to smell his masculine cologne, something expensive and sophisticated that perfectly matched his presence. Do you really believe that? I have to believe it. Why? Because if I don't, what do I have left? The silence that followed was charged with tension. Helen could hear her own heart beating. There was something in the way Arthur looked at her that made her feel exposed, as if he could see right through her. Helen, he said finally, and the way her name sounded in his voice made something tighten inside her. Have you ever thought about doing something different, besides cleaning? Like what? I don't know, you seem intelligent. I don't have an education, Mr. Wellington. I stopped after high school. Education can be caught up on. Intelligence can't. Helen didn't know what to say. Executives like him didn't have conversations like this with cleaners like her. Something strange was happening, but she couldn't pinpoint what it was. I have to go, Arthur said, checking the expensive watch on his wrist. But I'd like to continue our conversation another time. I don't know if that's appropriate, sir. Why wouldn't it be? Helen stared at him. You know why. Arthur smiled again, and this time the smile reached his eyes. Perhaps. But sometimes rules need to be questioned. He walked away towards the elevator, leaving Helen standing in the middle of the lobby, trying to understand what had just happened. Her hands were trembling as she held the cleaning cloth, and she realized her breathing was ragged. In the following days, Helen tried to convince herself that the conversation had just been a kind gesture on his part. Executives sometimes tried to be nice to employees. It was normal. But the way he had looked at her, the way he had said her name wouldn't leave her mind. She started paying more attention to his schedule. She discovered that he always arrived at 6 in the morning and left around 9 at night. On weekends, he sometimes showed up on Saturday mornings. Helen didn't work on weekends, but she started to wonder what it would be like to run into him when the building was emptier. A week after their conversation, Helen was in the 15th floor restroom when she heard the door open. She was on her knees cleaning the floor and looked up to see Arthur standing in the doorway. Sorry, she said, getting up quickly. I'm almost done. You don't have to leave. His voice echoed in the enclosed space, and Helen felt a shiver run down her spine. They were alone, far from other employees, in a small, intimate space. Mr. Wellington, Arthur. The word came out like a command. My name is Arthur. I can't call you by your first name. It's not appropriate. He took a step towards her. And what is appropriate, Helen? The way he said her name made her legs feel weak. Keeping things professional. And what if I don't want to keep things professional? Helen swallowed hard. You're my boss. Not directly. Still what? He was closer now. Close enough for her to see the details of his blue eyes, the small lines around them that showed life experience. This is dangerous, Helen whispered. Why is it dangerous? Because... She stopped, unable to form the words. How could she explain that she was feeling drawn to him in a way she had never experienced? How could she say that she thought about him when she should be sleeping, that she imagined what it would be like to be touched by him? Because you feel something, Arthur said, finishing her thought. Helen stared at him. I can't feel anything. Why not? Because we're from different worlds. So what? So people like me don't get involved with people like you. Arthur took another step closer. Now he was so close she could feel the heat from his body. Who made that rule? Everybody knows. Everybody is wrong. Helen tried to back away, but her back met the wall. Mr. Wellington, Arthur, please. Please what? Don't make this harder than it already is. For the first time, Helen saw something vulnerable in his face. What if I told you I'm finding it hard too? Her heart stopped for a moment. What? You fascinate me, Helen. From the first day I saw you. That's impossible. Why would it be impossible? Because I'm invisible. Arthur raised his hand and very gently touched her face. The touch was light, but it sent shockwaves through Helen's body. You are far from invisible. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the warmth of his hand against her skin. It was wrong, she knew. It was dangerous. But it was happening, regardless of what her rational mind was saying. This is going to end badly, she whispered. Maybe. Definitely. Then, why aren't you pushing me away? Helen opened her eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that made her stomach clench. Because I'm an idiot. Arthur smiled, and this time the smile was genuine, completely transforming his face. You are many things, Helen. An idiot is not one of them. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the elevator arriving on the floor. Arthur immediately stepped away, and Helen felt the loss of his warmth like a cold shock. Think about what I said, Arthur murmured, adjusting his tie. Not all rules need to be followed. He left the restroom, leaving Helen leaning against the wall, her heart pounding and her mind in a whirlwind. She knew she was entering dangerous territory, but for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. That night, during the long ride home on the crowded bus, Helen replayed every word of their conversation, every look, every touch. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things, that a man like Arthur Wellington would never be interested in a woman like her. But when she finally got home and looked at herself in the mirror of the small bathroom, she shared with her grandmother. She saw something different in her eyes. There was a spark there that hadn't existed before, a dangerous hope that she knew she should stifle, but that grew with every beat of her heart. Helen Smith was falling in love with Arthur Wellington, and it could destroy them both. The following days were torture for Helen. She tried to focus on her work, but every time she heard the sound of the elevator or footsteps in the hallway, her heart leaped in the hope that it was Arthur. At the same time, a part of her hoped he wouldn't appear, that moment in the restroom had just been a strange dream she could forget. But Arthur didn't appear. Not on Monday, not on Tuesday, not on Wednesday. Helen found out through conversations among the office staff that he had travelled to London on business. She felt relieved and disappointed at the same time, a contradiction that made her angry with herself. On Thursday night, Helen was working alone on the 22nd floor when she found a folder left on a desk. She looked around to make sure she was alone before opening it to see if there was any identification. Inside, she found documents with the name Wellington Holdings and an old black and white photo. The photo showed an older man, who looked like Arthur, next to a beautiful woman with dark hair. On the back it was written, Robert and Carmen Wellington, 1985. Helen studied the photo, trying to understand why the woman looked familiar. Interesting, isn't it? Arthur's voice made her jump and drop the folder, scattering the papers on the floor. She turned and found him leaning against the doorframe, watching her with an unreadable expression. Mr. Wellington, I didn't know you. We're back. I'm sorry, I was just trying to see whose folder this was to return it to its owner, he finished, approaching. I know. Helen knelt to gather the papers, but Arthur bent down and picked up the photo before she could reach it. My parents, he said, looking at the image, Robert and Carmen Wellington. They were a handsome couple, Helen said, still gathering the papers. They were. Arthur put the photo in his inner jacket pocket. My mother died when I was 15. Cancer. Helen stopped what she was doing and looked at him. There was pain in his voice, a vulnerability that contrasted with the image of the powerful executive. "I'm sorry. And my father? Well, my father made choices that destroyed many lives." Something in the way he said that made Helen shiver. "What do you mean?" Arthur studied her for a long moment. "You really don't know who I am, do you? I know you own this building, that you have important companies, but you don't know how my family got this fortune." Helen shook her head. Arthur sat in one of the nearby chairs, a surprising gesture for someone in his position. "My grandfather built the family's first business honestly. He was a man of integrity, but when he died, my father inherited everything, and let's just say he didn't have the same values." Helen finished gathering the papers and sat in a nearby chair, keeping a safe distance. "And what does this have to do with me?" "Maybe everything, maybe nothing." Arthur looked at her. "What was your mother's maiden name?" The question caught her completely off guard. "Why?" "Just tell me." Carmen Smith." The words came out automatically, but as soon as she said them, Helen regretted it. Why was she telling him intimate details of her life? Arthur's face went pale. He was silent for so long that Helen began to feel uncomfortable. "Her full name was Carmen Smith Jones," he said finally. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Helen felt the blood run cold in her veins. "How do you know that?" Arthur ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture she had never seen from him before. "Because my father used to talk about her." "What?" "Carmen Smith Jones, the woman who almost destroyed our marriage." Helen's world stopped. Arthur's words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't process them. "That's impossible. Your mother had an affair with my father," Arthur said, his voice low and controlled. "It lasted 2 years. When my mother found out, she almost killed herself, literally." Helen shot up, knocking over her chair. "No, that can't be true." "I was 13 when I found out. I overheard a terrible fight between my parents, my mother screaming her name, my father begging for forgiveness." "Stop." Helen covered her ears. "I don't want to hear this." Arthur stood up and approached her. "Helen, I had to tell you." "Why? Why are you telling me this?" "Because it explains a lot." "Explains what?" "Why I've been drawn to you since the first moment I saw you. Why you seem familiar, even though I know we've never met before." Helen stared at him, tears burning her eyes. "Are you saying you're interested in me because of my mother?" "No." Arthur shook his head vehemently. "That's not it." "Then what is it?" "It's that maybe fate is trying to give us a chance to right the wrongs of the past." Helen laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless sound. "Right the wrongs?" "My mother died in a car accident when I was 8. Did you know that?" Arthur closed his eyes for a moment. "Yes." "And did you know she was going to meet someone that night? That my grandmother always said my mother was doing something she shouldn't have been?" "Helen, it was your father, wasn't it? She was going to meet your father when she died." Arthur's silence was answer enough. Helen backed away from him, feeling nauseous. All this time, all this talk about finding me interesting, about questioning rules, it was all because of her. "No, you're wrong." Am I? Or are you trying to finish what your father started?" The accusation hit Arthur like a punch. He moved towards her, but Helen retreated. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice trembling with anger and pain. "Don't you dare touch me." "Helen, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. I understood perfectly." She grabbed her cleaning cart. "And now I'm leaving." "You can't just leave like this." "I can and I will." Helen headed for the door, but Arthur blocked her path. "Please, just listen to me." "I listened. I heard that my mother was your father's mistress. I heard that because of it your mother almost committed suicide. I heard that my mother died on her way to meet a married man who was playing with her." "It wasn't like that." "No? Then how was it?" Arthur ran his hands over his face. "It was complicated." "Oh, it was complicated." Helen laughed again, the sound cutting. "Of course it was. It's always complicated when rich men decide to play with poor women. My father fell in love with her. And that makes it all right. He was married, Mr. Wellington, he had a family, and my mother was just a naive girl who believed his lies. He was going to leave my mother. But he didn't, did he? Arthur shook his head. So in the end, my mother died for nothing, for empty promises and impossible dreams. Helen pushed the cart towards the door, but Arthur grabbed her arm. Please, Helen, don't leave like this. She shook off his touch. Let go of me. I'm not my father. No? A rich, powerful man, thinking he can have anything he wants. You seem exactly like your father to me. You're wrong. Am I? Then prove it. How? Helen stared at him, tears finally streaming down her face. Leave me alone. She left the room, leaving Arthur standing alone among the scattered papers and the weight of the truth. During the ride home, Helen cried on the bus, not caring about the curious glances from other passengers. It all made sense now, why her grandmother always spoke of her mother with such contempt disguised as concern, why there were never any pictures of her at home, why Grandma Mary always said Helen had her mother's bad blood. When she got home, she found her grandmother watching television in the small living room. You're home early, Grandma Mary observed without taking her eyes off the screen. Grandma, Helen said, her voice still choked with emotion. Tell me about my mother. Grandma Mary finally looked at her. I've told you everything you need to know. No, tell me the truth. The older woman sighed and turned off the television. Why are you digging up the past? Because I found out she had an affair. Grandma Mary's face hardened. Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true? Grandma Mary got up and went to the kitchen. Helen followed her. Your mother was a fool, the grandmother said finally. She believed in fairy tales. Tell me what happened. Grandma Mary leaned against the sink, her back to Helen. She fell in love with a man she couldn't have. A married rich man who promised her the world. And what happened? What always happens in these situations? He got tired of her and wanted to get rid of her. But your mother wouldn't accept it. She kept calling, showing up where he was, making scenes. Helen felt her stomach churn. And the night she died. She had received a message telling her to meet him at a steakhouse on the highway, that they were going to talk about their future. Grandma Mary turned, her eyes hard. But when she got there, no one was there. She waited in the rain. On the way back, she lost control of the car. He lied to her? Of course he lied. Men like him always lie to women like us. Helen sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. Why did you never tell me this? What for? So you could make the same mistake? What mistake? Grandma Mary approached her. The mistake of thinking you can be like them. Your mother forgot her place in the world, and she paid dearly for it. Helen thought of Arthur, of the way he looked at her, of the words he had said. What if it's different? It's never different, Helen. Never. That night, Helen lay awake late, thinking about everything she had discovered. Her mother had died for love, or the illusion of it, and now she was following the same path, falling for a man who was out of her reach. But there was a crucial difference. She knew the truth. She knew the risks, and yet when she thought of Arthur, of how she felt when she was near him, she couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. On Friday morning, Helen arrived at work, determined to avoid any contact with Arthur. She focused on her tasks, kept her head down, and tried to pretend the last few days hadn't happened. But around 10 in the morning, she received a message from reception. Mr. Wellington wanted to see her in his office. Helen went up to the top floor with her heart pounding. The secretary directed her to the solid mahogany door that led to Arthur's office. He was standing behind his desk, looking out the window that offered a panoramic view of New York City. When she entered, he turned. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice, Helen." She stood near the door, ready to run if necessary. "What do you want?" "I want you to know the whole truth." "I already know more than I'd like to." Arthur approached her but kept a respectful distance. "My father destroyed many lives, including your mother's, But he also destroyed mine and my mother's. And what does that have to do with me? It has to do with the fact that I've spent the last 20 years trying to right his wrongs, trying to be different. Helen studied him. There was sincerity in his eyes, but also pain. And have you succeeded? I don't know. But I know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with our parents' past. How can you be sure? Arthur took another step towards her. Because when I look at you, I don't see your mother. I see you. I see a strong, intelligent woman who isn't intimidated even by me. You do intimidate me. Why? Helen hesitated. Because you make me feel things I shouldn't feel. And what's wrong with that? Everything. Helen shook her head. We can't repeat our parents' mistakes. Who says it would be a mistake? History. The difference between us. The fact that men like you don't marry women like me. Arthur stopped right in front of her. And what if I told you I don't care about that? I'd say you were lying. And what if I proved that I'm not? Helen stared at him, seeing the intensity in his blue eyes. How? Have dinner with me. The simplicity of the request caught her by surprise. What? Have dinner with me. Tonight. I can't. Why not? Because... Helen searched for a reason that wasn't because I'm afraid of falling even more in love with you. Because it's not appropriate. Forget what's appropriate. Forget the rules. Forget the past. Arthur held her face in his hands, a gentle but firm touch. One night. Just one night to find out if there's something real between us. Helen closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands against her skin. She knew she should say no. She knew she was risking her heart, maybe her own life. But when she opened her eyes and got lost in the deep blue of his, she knew it was already too late to turn back. One night, she whispered. And with those two words, Helen Smith sealed her fate. Helen spent the rest of the day in a state of shock. She had agreed to have dinner with Arthur Wellington. She couldn't believe her own audacity, nor the fact that he had actually invited her. During her shift, she tried to convince herself she should cancel, make up an excuse back out, but every time she thought of doing so, she remembered the look in his eyes when she said, one night. At 5 in the afternoon, as she was putting away her cleaning supplies, she received another message, an address and a time, 8 o'clock, a restaurant in Tribeca. Helen had never been to Tribeca, let alone a fine dining restaurant. Her stomach clenched with nervousness. The ride home was torture. Helen alternated between excitement and panic. What would she wear? She had nothing appropriate for dinner with a man like Arthur. Her clothes were simple, cheap, bought on, sale or given to her by others. When she got home, Grandma Mary immediately noticed her agitation. What happened? You're acting strange. Nothing, Grandma, just tired. But Grandma Mary was not easily fooled. Helen Smith, I've raised you since you were a little girl. I know when you're lying. Helen sighed. There was no hiding it. I'm having dinner with someone tonight. Her grandmother's eyes narrowed. With whom? A friend. What friend? You don't have friends. The observation hurt, mainly because it was true. Helen had isolated herself so much that she had no social life. It's someone new. A man? Yes. Grandma Mary crossed her arms. Where do you know this man from? Helen hesitated. From work. From work? Her grandmother's voice rose an octave. Helen, don't tell me you're getting involved with a cleaner. He's not a cleaner. Then what? Helen took a deep breath. He's the owner of the building where I work. The silence that followed was deafening. Grandma Mary sat down heavily in the kitchen chair, as if she'd been punched. Have you lost your mind? Grandma, you've completely lost your mind. The older woman's voice trembled with anger and fear. How can you be as stupid as your mother? It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Grandma Mary stood up abruptly. Rich man, you're poor. He's married, you're single. How is it not the same thing? He's not married. Yet. But he has a girlfriend, a fiancé, whatever. Men like that always do. Helen realized she knew nothing about Arthur's personal life. He could very well have a girlfriend, a fiancée. The thought made her stomach ache. "It's just one dinner, Grandma." "That's how it starts, Helen. It always starts like this." Grandma Mary gripped her shoulders. "Please, my granddaughter, don't do this. Don't repeat your mother's mistake." Helen looked into her grandmother's worried eyes and almost gave up, almost called to cancel. But then she remembered the way Arthur had looked at her, the sincerity in his voice when he said he wanted to prove he was different from his father. "One night," Helen said, "just one night to see if it's worth it or not." Grandma Mary shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You're going to get hurt, child." "Maybe, but I need to find out for myself." Her grandmother released her shoulders and stepped away. "Then don't come crying to me when he breaks your heart." Helen went to her room, her heart heavy with her grandmother's disapproval, but determined not to give up. She opened her closet and looked at the few clothes she owned. There was a navy blue dress she had received from the lady of one of the houses where she used to work. It wasn't fashionable, but it was elegant and discreet. She took a long shower, washed her hair, and spent the next hour trying to make it look presentable without a professional hairdryer. She applied a little makeup. She only had mascara, lipstick, and a cheap compact powder, but she did her best. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The dress enhanced her subtle curves, and she had managed to tame her curls into a more sophisticated look. She wasn't perfect, but she was presentable. The address Arthur had given was over an hour from her home by public transit. Helen left early, nervous about being late. During the trip, she tried to calm herself, but her thoughts were racing. What would they talk about? What would she order? Did she know anything about etiquette in fine dining restaurants? When she finally arrived at the address, Helen stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, just watching. The restaurant was elegant but discreet, with large glass windows that allowed a view of the sophisticated interior. There were uniformed valets and a stream of clearly successful people entering and leaving. Helen checked the time on her phone. 8 o'clock sharp. She took a deep breath and headed for the entrance. The maître d' greeted her politely, and when she mentioned Arthur's name, immediately led her through the dining room to a reserved table in a more private area. Helen tried not to look at the other people, aware that her clothes and appearance marked her as someone who didn't belong in that environment. Arthur was already seated, wearing a dark suit that looked like it had been custom-made for him. When he saw her approaching, he stood up and a genuine smile lit up his face. "Helen," he said, and the way he pronounced her name made something stir inside her. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she murmured, allowing him to pull out her chair for her to sit. The simple gesture made her even more nervous. No one had ever done that for her. "Did you find the place easily?" "Yes." She decided not to mention the hour-long trip on crowded buses. Arthur studied her for a moment, as if trying to read her thoughts. "You're nervous." "A little." "You don't need to be, it's just dinner." Helen looked around the sophisticated restaurant, aware that this just dinner probably cost more than she earned in a month. "It's very elegant here. I thought you'd like it." "It's nice," she said diplomatically. The waiter approached with the wine list, but Arthur dismissed him with a wave. "I brought something special," he said to Helen. "I hope you like red wine." "Actually, I don't drink much." "Just a little, then. It's a 2015 Barolo. Very smooth." Helen nodded, although she had no idea what Barolo was. The waiter poured the wine into enormous glasses, and she took a small sip. It was indeed smooth, with a complex flavor she had never experienced. "So," Arthur said after the waiter left, "tell me about yourself." "There's not much to tell." "I'm sure there is." He leaned forward slightly. "For example, what did you do before working in my building?" Helen sipped her wine, trying to relax. "I worked for a smaller cleaning company, cleaned houses and small offices." "And before that?" "I studied until I finished high school. Then I started working." "You never thought about going to college?" Helen laughed, but without humor. "With what money? I needed to help support my grandmother." Arthur nodded, and she saw something like admiration in his eyes. "That must have been hard. It was the life I knew, but not the life you chose." The observation caught her by surprise. What do you mean? I mean, you didn't have much of a choice, did you? Your circumstances determined your path. Helen thought about it. I suppose so. And if the circumstances were different, what would you choose to do? No one had ever asked her that. Helen took another sip of wine, feeling a bit braver. Maybe I'd study psychology. Psychology. I've always been interested in understanding why people do what they do, why they make the decisions they make. Arthur smiled. And what's your theory on why I'm here tonight? The question made her blush. I don't know. Take a guess. Helen studied him. There was a playful look in his eyes, but also an intensity that made her feel like she was being tested. Maybe it's curiosity. About what the daughter of the woman who almost destroyed your family is like. Arthur's smile vanished. Do you really think that? I don't know what to think. Then let me clarify. Arthur leaned further forward, his voice low and intense. I'm here because from the first day I saw you, you affected me in a way I can't explain. I'm here because you're the only person I know who doesn't want anything from me. How can you be so sure? Because you tried to push me away several times. If you wanted something, you'd be trying to get closer. Helen considered this. It was true. And that attracts you? It intrigues me, as does your strength, your dignity, the way you don't bow down to me even knowing who I am. Does everyone bow down to you? Everyone. That must be lonely. Arthur paused with his glass halfway to his mouth. Why did you say that? Because if no one ever disagrees with you, if no one ever challenges you, how can you know who really cares about you? He studied her for a long moment. You're more perceptive than most of the psychologists I know. And you know many? Arthur laughed, the first genuine laugh she had heard from him. More than I'd like to admit. The conversation was interrupted by the waiter bringing the first course. Helen looked at the elaborate presentation in front of her and tried not to show that she didn't know where to begin. It's octopus, Arthur said, noticing her hesitation. Marinated in olive oil with herbs, very flavorful. Helen tried it and had to agree. It was delicious, unlike anything she had ever tasted. It's very good. I'm glad you like it. As the evening progressed, Helen felt more relaxed. The wine helped, but mostly it was the way Arthur treated her. He really listened to her, asked genuine questions about her life, her opinions. He didn't seem to be putting on an act or trying to impress her. During the main course, Arthur told her about his own life, about growing up knowing he would be responsible for the family empire, but hating the way his father conducted business. When I took over, I changed a lot of things, he said. I cut ties with companies that use slave labor, improved working conditions in our own businesses, started social responsibility programs. Why? Because I didn't want to be like my father. And did you succeed? Arthur hesitated. I'm still trying every day. It must be hard to carry the weight of someone else's actions. It is. He looked at her intensely. You understand that, don't you? Carrying the weight of your mother's actions. Helen nodded. My grandmother always reminds me that I have her bad blood. That's cruel. It's true, too. My mother made bad decisions that hurt people. But that doesn't mean you'll make the same decisions. How can I be sure? Because you have a choice. Always. Helen drank more wine, feeling bold. And what choice are you making now? What do you mean? Having dinner with me? Having this conversation, what choice are you making? Arthur put his glass on the table and looked at her. I'm choosing to follow my heart instead of my head. And what is your heart saying? That you're different from any woman I've ever met. That when I'm with you, I feel real. The intensity in his voice made something tighten in Helen's chest. And your head? My head is telling me I'm crazy. That you're going to run away when you find out who I really am. And who are you really? Arthur smiled sadly. A man who inherited more money than he could ever spend, but who has no one to share it with. A man who built an empire to prove he was better than his father, but who deep down is afraid of being exactly like him. The brutal honesty left him vulnerable in a way Helen had never seen. You're not like your father. How can you be sure? Because you're here. Because you brought me to a public place, treated me with respect, didn't try to impress me with power or money. Because you're asking me what I think instead of telling me what to do. Arthur reached across the table and touched her hand. The contact sent shockwaves through Helen's body. Helen. Yes. I want to see you again. Her heart raced. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Because... She looked at their joined hands on the table. Because I'm falling in love with you. The silence that followed made Helen immediately regret her words. She tried to pull her hand away, but Arthur held it more firmly. Look at me, he said softly. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes. I'm falling in love with you too, Arthur said. And it terrifies me more than any business deal I've ever made. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I have something to lose that really matters. Helen felt tears burn her eyes. Arthur, I know it's complicated. I know there's history between our families. I know we're from different worlds, but I can't pretend I don't feel anything. What if it goes wrong? What if it goes right? The question hung in the air between them, fraught with possibilities and dangers. Helen knew that if she said yes, if she allowed this to continue, there would be no going back. It would be a leap into the unknown, a risk that could destroy her as it had destroyed her mother. But when she looked into Arthur's blue eyes, she saw something her mother might never have seen in his father. True love. One chance, she said finally, but slowly, very slowly. The smile that lit up. Arthur's face was like the sunrise. Slowly, he agreed. We have all the time in the world. But neither Helen nor Arthur knew that time was exactly what they didn't have. The past was moving to catch up with them, and the choices they were making would awaken forces they would have preferred to leave dormant. In the 3 weeks following their dinner, Helen and Arthur met always in secret. Discreet meetings in distant cafes, quick lunches in small restaurants far from the financial district, long conversations on park benches when the city's hustle and bustle subsided. It was like living a double life, and Helen felt torn between guilt and a happiness she had never experienced. Arthur was different when they were alone. Away from the corporate environment, he was funny, attentive, genuinely interested in her opinions on everything from politics to movies. He listened to her talk about her dormant dreams as if they were the most important plans in the world. Helen also began to know the man behind the powerful facade. Arthur told her about the pressures of his childhood, about growing up knowing that hundreds of people depended on the decisions he would make. About the loneliness of always being surrounded by people who wanted something from him. You're the first person in years who hasn't asked me for anything, he said during one of their meetings in Central Park. It's liberating. Everyone has something to offer besides money, Helen replied. You just weren't looking in the right places. But Helen's secret happiness would soon be tested. The following Monday, while cleaning the 28th floor, she was approached by Marcella Jones, Arthur's executive secretary. Marcella was an elegant woman in her 40s, always perfectly dressed and with a posture that made it clear she knew exactly her place in the company's hierarchy. Helen, can I speak with you for a moment? Helen stopped vacuuming, her heart pounding. Of course, Ms. Jones. Let's go in here, Marcella said, indicating an empty meeting room. When the door closed, Marcella turned to Helen with a serious expression. I know you've been meeting with Mr. Wellington outside of work. Helen's blood ran cold, but she tried to maintain her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Helen, I've worked for the Wellington family for 15 years. Nothing escapes my attention. Marcella crossed her arms. Especially when it comes to protecting Mr. Wellington's interests. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not saying you are, but I need you to understand the implications of what's happening. Helen sat down in one of the chairs, her legs suddenly weak. What implications? Marcella sighed and sat across from her. Mr. Wellington isn't just a rich man, Helen. He's a public figure. Every move he makes is watched, analyzed, judged. The company has shares on the stock market, government contracts, responsibilities to thousands of employees. And what does that have to do with me? everything. Because when the press finds out, and they always find out, that the CEO of Wellington Holdings is involved with a cleaning lady, it will be a scandal. The words hit Helen like slaps. A cleaning lady, she repeated, her voice low. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just being realistic about how the world will see this. And how will they see it? Marcella hesitated, and Helen saw a hint of compassion in her eyes. They'll say you're a gold digger, that you're trying to take advantage of him. They'll investigate your life, your family, your past. Helen's stomach clenched. My past? Yes. And when they find out about the connection between your mother and Mr. Wellington's father, Marcella shook her head, it will be a media circus. Helen stood up abruptly. How do you know about my mother? As I said, I've worked for this family for a long time. I know all the skeletons in the closet. And are you threatening me? No. I'm trying to protect you. Marcella also stood up. I like you, Helen. You're a good person, hard-working, honest. That's why I'm warning you before it's too late. Warning me about what? That this relationship will destroy you both, especially you. Helen headed for the door, but Marcella held her by the arm. Helen, please, think about what could happen. Think about your grandmother, your life. Is it worth risking everything? That night, Helen arrived home too disturbed to hide her feelings. Grandma Mary immediately noticed something was wrong. What is it? Did something happen at work? Helen sat in the kitchen, the weight of her conversation with Marcella crushing her shoulders. Grandma, have you ever regretted a decision in your life? Several. Grandma Mary sat across from her. Why are you asking? Because I think I'm about to make a decision that could change everything. It's about that man, isn't it? Helen nodded. Grandma Mary sighed deeply. Helen, I've lived a long time. I've seen a lot, and one thing I've learned is that when it comes to the heart, there's no right decision. There are only decisions we can live with. And what if I can't live with the consequences? Then you shouldn't make that decision. Helen looked at her grandmother, seeking guidance in her experienced eyes. Do you think I'm making the same mistake as my mother? I don't know, my child. Your mother fell in love with a man who wasn't available. Is this man available? He is. Does he treat you well? Very well. And do you truly love each other? Helen hesitated. I think so. Grandma Mary studied her granddaughter's face. Then maybe it's not the same mistake, but that doesn't mean it will be easy. That night Helen barely slept. The conversation with Marcella echoed in her mind. Media scandal, investigation of her past, destruction of reputations. Was love really enough to face all that? The next day Helen tried to act normally at work, but she was tense and distracted. Around noon she received a message from Arthur, asking to meet her in the underground parking garage. When she got there, she found Arthur leaning against his car, a grim expression on his face. Marcella spoke to you, he said as soon as he saw her. It wasn't a question. Helen nodded. And what did she say? Helen told him about the conversation, watching Arthur's face grow increasingly closed off. She's right about the scandal, he said finally. If our relationship becomes public now, it will be a circus. Becomes public now? Helen felt something cold settle in her stomach. And when would be the right time? Arthur ran his hands through his hair. I don't know, Helen. We need time to figure out how to handle this. Time for what? For you to decide if I'm worth the trouble. That's not it. No. Then what is it? Arthur moved toward her, but Helen backed away. Helen, you don't understand the complexity of the situation. Then explain it to me. I have responsibilities. To the company, to the employees, to your reputation. Yes, to my reputation too, but not for the reason you think. What reason do I think? That I care more about what people will say than about you. Helen stared at him. And do you? Of course I care, I'm human. Arthur approached again. But I care more about you. That's why I'm trying to find a way to protect you. Protect me from what? From the media, from the cruel comments, from the investigation into your private life. And what if I say I don't need protection? Arthur studied her. Are you really willing to face all that? Helen thought of Marcella's words, of how the world would see her, of the consequences for her simple, quiet life. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I can't live in hiding forever. It wouldn't be forever, just until when, Arthur? Until you get tired of me? Until someone more convenient comes along? How can you think that? Because that's exactly what happened to my mother. The accusation hung in the air between them. Arthur recoiled as if he had been slapped. I am not my father. No? Then prove it. How? Stop hiding what you feel. Stop treating our relationship like it's something to be ashamed of. Arthur was silent for a long moment. And what if I say, I need more time? Helen felt her heart break. Then I'll say that maybe Marcella is right, maybe this has no future. Helen, but she was already walking away. When you decide what you want, let me know. She left him in the parking garage and went back to work, trying to keep her composure. But inside, she felt like she was falling apart. For the rest of the week, Helen and Arthur avoided each other. She arrived at work earlier and left later, trying to minimize the chances of running into him. When they did, they exchanged only formal greetings as if the past few months hadn't happened. Helen tried to convince herself she was better off this way, that she had made the right choice by stepping away before things got more complicated. But at night, alone in her room, she cried herself to sleep. The following Friday, Helen was cleaning the restroom on the top floor when she heard voices coming from Arthur's office. The door was ajar, and she recognized Marcella's voice. The company's stock dropped 3 points this week, Marcella was saying. Investors are nervous about the rumors. What rumors? Arthur's voice sounded tense. About you and the cleaning lady. Someone saw you together and posted it on social media. Helen felt her blood run cold. She moved closer to the door, knowing she shouldn't be listening but unable to pull herself away. What kind of post? Arthur asked. A photo of you two in the park. The caption says something about the tycoon and the cleaner. It already has thousands of likes and comments. Helen leaned against the wall, her legs weak. It was happening exactly as Marcella had predicted. And what do the comments say? Arthur's voice was dangerously low. Nothing you want to hear. But the point is, it's public now. The financial press has already started calling. Some board members are questioning your leadership ability. Because of a personal relationship. You know how it is, Arthur. Leadership isn't just about competence. It's about judgment. And a lot of people are going to question your judgment for getting involved with someone so different. Different how? You know how. Marcella's voice softened. I know you like her. But maybe it's better to end this before it causes more damage. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen held her breath, waiting for Arthur's response. You're right, he said finally. I need to think about the company, the employees. I can't let personal feelings affect thousands of people. Helen felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Without making a sound, she moved away from the door and ran for the elevator. During the ride down, she tried to process what she had heard. Arthur was willing to end things with her to protect his business, exactly as Marcella had predicted, exactly as his father had done to her mother. When she reached the ground floor, Helen knew what she had to do. She went straight to the Human Resources Department and handed in her resignation letter. But why, Helen? Asked the HR manager. You're one of our best employees. Personal reasons, Helen said. I need to move on. She cleaned out her locker, said goodbye to her co-workers, and walked out of Wellington Tower for the last time. That night, Grandma Mary found Helen crying in the kitchen. What happened? Helen told her everything, about the social media post, about the conversation she had overheard, about her decision to quit. You did the right thing, Grandma Mary said, hugging her granddaughter. Better to leave with your head held high than to be humiliated. But Helen didn't feel like she had done the right thing. She felt as if she had lost the most important thing in her life before she even had a chance to fight for it. On Saturday morning, Helen was in the kitchen having coffee when she heard the sound of a car pulling up in front of the house. She looked out the window and was shocked to see Arthur getting out of a black BMW. Grandma Mary had heard the noise too. "Who is it?" "It's him," Helen whispered. "Your boyfriend?" "Ex-boyfriend." Grandma Mary went to the window and saw Arthur walking towards the house. "Child, what a handsome man." "Grandma!" "What?" "I'm old, not blind." Grandma Mary studied Helen. "And from the way you're looking at him, you still like him a lot." The doorbell rang. Helen hesitated, but Grandma Mary was already heading for the door. "Grandma Mary," Helen said urgently, "don't let him in." "Why not?" Because it will hurt too much." Grandma Mary looked at her granddaughter with understanding eyes. "Sometimes pain is necessary, my child. Sometimes it's the only way to heal." The doorbell rang again. Helen took a deep breath and went to open the door. Arthur was standing in the small front yard, wearing jeans and a simple white shirt. He looked different away from his expensive suits, more human, more vulnerable. "Helen," he said when she opened the door, "I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's a lot to talk about." Helen crossed her arms. "I heard your conversation with Marcella. I heard you decide I wasn't worth the trouble." "You heard wrong. I heard you say you needed to think about the company, the employees, that you couldn't let personal feelings affect thousands of people. And that's true, but it's not the whole truth." "What's the rest of the truth?" Arthur took a step closer. "The truth is I spent the entire weekend thinking about you, about us, about everything we could have, and I came to a conclusion." "What conclusion?" "That I'd rather face any scandal, any problem, any consequence, than live without you." Helen felt her heart race, but she tried to keep her expression neutral. "And the company, the investors, your reputation?" "They'll adapt, and if they don't, I'll build another company, with other investors, with a new reputation." "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life." Arthur took her hands. "Helen, I love you. I love your strength, your honesty, the way you make me want to be a better man. I love how you don't treat me differently because of money, and how you challenge me when you think I'm wrong." Tears began to stream down Helen's face. "Arthur, I'm not going to lie and say it will be easy. There will be cruel comments, investigations, questions, but if you're willing to face it with me, I promise I won't give up on us." Helen looked into his blue eyes and saw absolute sincerity. She also saw fear, vulnerability, love. "What if it goes wrong? Then at least we will have tried." Helen thought of her mother, who had died chasing an impossible love. She thought of her grandmother, who had spent her whole life protecting herself from more pain. She thought of herself, standing at the crossroads between fear and courage. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Sure that it's worth it?" "Absolutely," Arthur smiled. "You're worth any trouble, Helen Smith." And in that moment, standing on the doorstep of her simple house, looking at the man who had turned her world upside down, Helen made the bravest decision of her life. "Okay," she said, "let's try." The decision to go public with their relationship brought immediate and devastating consequences. The following Monday, Helen woke up to dozens of missed calls from unknown numbers. When she finally answered one, a reporter was on the other end, wanting her side of the story. "What story?" Helen asked, still confused. "About your relationship with Arthur Wellington, and about your family's connection to his." Helen hung up the phone, her heart pounding. How had they found out about the family connection? She ran to the living room where Grandma Mary was watching television with a grim expression. "Grandma, what?" "It's on the news," Grandma Mary said, turning up the volume. On the screen, a news anchor was talking about the scandal shaking the New York corporate world. The report showed photos of Helen and Arthur in the park, but also old photos of Carmen Smith-Jones and Robert Wellington. "We've discovered that this is not the first time the Smith and Wellington families have crossed paths," the reporter said. 25 years ago, Carmen Smith-Jones, the mother of Arthur Wellington's current girlfriend, had an extramarital affair with Robert Wellington, the businessman's father. Carmen died in a car accident in 1998, while on her way to meet with Robert Wellington. Helen sat down heavily on the sofa, watching her private life being exposed on national television. The photos of her mother, young and beautiful, appeared side by side with current photos of her and Arthur. "How did they get this information?" she whispered. "Money," Grandma Mary said bitterly. "It's always money." Helen's phone rang again. This time it was Arthur. "Helen, are you okay?" "No." Her voice came out choked. "They're talking about my mother on television." "I know. I'm watching. Where are you?" "At home." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." "You can't come here. There are reporters on the street." Helen looked out the window and saw 2 television vans parked in front of the house, with reporters and cameras set up on the sidewalk. "Damn it," Arthur muttered. "Okay, I'll send Marcus to get you. He'll come in through the back of the house." Marcus was Arthur's driver and personal security. 15 minutes later, he appeared in the backyard, having jumped the neighbor's fence. "Ms. Helen, Mr. Wellington sent me to get you." Helen looked at Grandma Mary. "Grandma..." "Go," the older woman said. "You can't stay here with these people at the door, and I can handle myself. I'm afraid to leave you." "Don't worry about me, I'm worried about you." Marcus led Helen through the back of the neighborhood to a car that was waiting 3 blocks away. During the drive to Arthur's apartment, Helen tried to process how her life had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. Arthur's apartment was on the top floor of a luxurious building on the Upper East Side. Helen had never been there before. It was huge, modern, with a spectacular view of the city, but also cold and impersonal. Arthur was waiting for her at the entrance, and as soon as he saw her, he pulled her into his arms. "I'm so sorry," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I'm so sorry you're going through this." "How did they find out about our parents?" "Someone leaked the information. I'm trying to find out who." Helen pulled away from him. "Why? Does it matter who it was? The information is true." "It matters because I want to know who is trying to hurt us." "Maybe no one is trying to hurt us. Maybe this is just the natural consequence of our choices." Arthur studied her. "Are you regretting this?" Helen walked to the panoramic window, looking at the city below. "I don't know what I'm feeling." Arthur's cell phone rang. He answered it, and Helen only heard his side of the conversation. "How much?" "Seriously? And the board?" "I understand. No, I'm not going to do that, because it's not an option." When he hung up, Helen turned to him. "Bad news? The company's stock has dropped 15 points since this morning. 3 clients have cancelled contracts. The board of directors wants to meet tomorrow." "For what?" Arthur hesitated. "To discuss my position in the company." Helen felt the floor disappear from under her feet. "They want to fire you. They want me to step down temporarily until the scandal blows over." "And are you going to do it?" "No." "Arthur, you can't lose everything because of me. It's not because of you, it's for us." "Isn't that the same thing?" He approached her. "Helen, I built this empire, but what's the point of having everything if I have no one to share it with? You can find someone else, someone more appropriate." "I don't want someone else. I want you." His cell phone rang again. This time it was a longer, more tense conversation. Helen realized something serious was happening. "What was it?" she asked when he hung up. "My cousin Beatrice is giving an interview to the media." "About what?" "About you, about our family, about why I shouldn't be with you." Helen felt nauseous. "What is she saying?" Arthur turned on the television. On one of the news networks, an elegant woman in her 40s was sitting in a studio, talking to an anchor. "We always knew Arthur was impulsive, but this is beyond the pale," Beatrice Wellington Montgomery was saying. "He is jeopardizing a legacy that our family has built over 3 generations." "And do you believe there is something premeditated about this relationship?" the anchor asked. "I won't make direct accusations, but I find it very convenient that the daughter of the woman who nearly destroyed our family has now appeared in Arthur's life." Helen sat down abruptly on the sofa. "She's implying I'm a con artist." "Beatrice has always been envious," Arthur said, turning off the television. "She thought she should have inherited part of the control of the company. But other people will think the same thing." "So what?" So she might be right. Arthur stared at her. What do you mean by that? Helen got up and started pacing. Think about it, Arthur. How many coincidences are too many? Me working in your building, you being attracted to me, us discovering the connection between our parents. What if it's not a coincidence? Are you suggesting you planned this? I'm suggesting that maybe fate, or whatever it is trying to finish what our parents started, and maybe that's not a good thing. Arthur gripped her shoulders. Helen, you're letting what these people are saying get to you. I'm letting reality get to me. You're losing everything because of me. I'm choosing you over all of it. But what if it's the wrong choice? It's not. How can you be so sure? Arthur pulled her closer. Because I know how I feel when I'm with you. I know how you make me want to be better. I know that I'd rather have you and nothing else than have everything and not have you. Helen started to cry. But what if I can't handle this? What if I'm not strong enough to endure people talking about me, my family, my past? Then we face it together. And what if we break in the process? Then at least we'll break together. Arthur's cell phone rang again, but this time he ignored it. It continued to ring insistently. Answer it, Helen said. It could be important. Arthur answered, and Helen saw his face go pale. When? Where? Okay, I'm on my way. What happened? Helen asked when he hung up. It's your grandmother. She collapsed. She's in the hospital. Helen's world stopped. What? Marcus is downstairs. We're going to the hospital now. During the drive to the public hospital in the Bronx, Helen couldn't stop shaking. Arthur held her hand, trying to comfort her, but all she could think was that she had abandoned Grandma Mary alone to face the reporters. It was my fault, she repeated. I left her alone. It wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. If I hadn't gotten involved with you, none of this would have happened. When they arrived at the hospital, they found out that Grandma Mary had suffered a hypertensive crisis. The doctors said she was stable but needed to be kept under observation. Helen ran to the room and found her grandmother connected to monitors, looking frail and small in the hospital bed. Grandma, she whispered, holding her hand. Grandma Mary opened her eyes. Helen? I'm here. How are you feeling? Tired. The older woman's voice was weak. Those reporters wouldn't stop ringing the doorbell. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have left you alone. That's not what caused the crisis, child. What was it then? Grandma Mary looked at Arthur, who was standing near the door. It was seeing you suffer. It was knowing that history was repeating itself. Helen felt tears burn her eyes. Grandma. Come here, Grandma Mary said, motioning for Helen to come closer. I want to talk to you. Helen leaned in to listen. Your mother died unhappy, Grandma Mary whispered. She died believing she wasn't worthy of love. She died thinking she had done everything wrong. She did do everything wrong. No, she fell in love. The mistake belonged to the man who played with her feelings. Grandma Mary looked at Arthur again. Is this man like his father? Helen followed her grandmother's gaze. I don't know. Then find out. But don't give up on love for fear of getting hurt. Your mother got hurt because she loved the wrong man, not because she loved. Grandma Mary fell asleep then, leaving Helen and Arthur alone in the hospital corridor. She's right, Arthur said finally. About what? About me being different from my father. About you being different from your mother, about us having the right to write our own story. Helen looked through the room's window at the woman who had raised her. But at what cost? The cost of courage. The cost of believing we deserve to be happy. That night, while Helen kept vigil by Grandma Mary's bedside, Arthur was gone for a few hours. When he returned, he was carrying a folder of documents. What's that? Helen asked. My resignation as CEO of Wellington Holdings. Helen stared at him, shocked. What? I submitted it this afternoon. As of tomorrow, I have no official ties to the company. Arthur, you can't do this. I already did. But why? Arthur sat beside her. Because I want to prove that you are more important to me than money or power. I want to prove that I am capable of choosing love over fear. And now, what are you going to do? I'm going to start over. Maybe start my own company, smaller, more personal. Or maybe do something completely different. Helen shook her head. I can't accept you giving up everything for me. It's not for you. It's for us. And it's for me, too. Arthur held her face in his hands. Helen, I've spent years building a life that would impress other people, but that didn't make me happy. With you, I discovered what it's like to have something that's truly worthwhile. And what if it goes wrong? What if we can't overcome all these pressures? Then at least we tried. And if it goes right, Arthur smiled, if it goes right, we'll have something that neither my father nor your mother managed to have. We'll have a true love built on conscious choices, not on illusions or convenience. Helen looked at Grandma Mary, sleeping peacefully, and thought of her mother, who died too young chasing an impossible dream. She thought of herself standing between the past and the future, between fear and courage. Are you sure? She asked. Sure that it's worth risking everything? Absolutely, Arthur said, because I've discovered that having you is worth more than having anything else. Helen took a deep breath and made her decision. Then let's risk everything. Together? Together. They kissed in the hospital corridor, under the cold fluorescent lights, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and the sound of heart monitors. It wasn't romantic or perfect, but it was real. It was the promise of two people who chose to fight for love regardless of the consequences. But neither Helen nor Arthur knew that the greatest test of their relationship was yet to come. As they kissed in the hospital, powerful forces were already moving to separate them for good. And this time, it wouldn't just be malicious comments or social pressures. This time, it would be a matter of life and death. 2 months after the hospital crisis, Helen and Arthur's life had found a new rhythm, unlike anything they had experienced before. Grandma Mary had fully recovered and surprisingly had become the biggest supporter of their relationship. That man truly loves you, she said one morning, as Helen prepared coffee in the kitchen of the small house. I saw it in his eyes at the hospital. And I see how he treats you. Helen smiled, stirring sugar into her coffee. Changed your mind about him? I changed my mind about love. Grandma Mary sat at the table. I spent my whole life thinking love was a dangerous thing, that it only brought suffering. But seeing you two, maybe the problem isn't love. Maybe it's choosing the wrong person to love. Helen sat across from her grandmother. And you think I chose the right person? I think you chose each other, and you do it every day, even when it's hard. And it had been hard. Over the past 2 months, Helen and Arthur had faced constant criticism from the media, the loss of friends and acquaintances who didn't approve of their relationship, and financial difficulties that neither of them had ever experienced before. Arthur had truly left Wellington Holdings and was building a new, much smaller and more modest company. Helen had gotten a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic and was studying at night to finish a technical degree in administration. The house where they now lived, rented by Arthur in a middle-class neighborhood in Queens, was simple but cozy. Nothing like the luxurious apartment on the Upper East Side, but Helen had never felt more at home anywhere. That Saturday afternoon, Helen was organizing papers on the small desk that served as their office when she found a letter that had arrived the day before, addressed to Arthur. The sender made her hesitate. Beatrice Wellington Montgomery. When Arthur arrived from the grocery store, Helen showed him the letter. It came yesterday, she said. I didn't open it because it's for you. Arthur studied the envelope. Beatrice doesn't write letters. It must be something official. He opened it and read in silence, his face growing more and more serious. What is it? Helen asked. It's a proposal. What kind of proposal? Arthur sat next to her on the sofa. Beatrice wants to buy my shares of Wellington Holdings for double the market value. Helen studied him. Why would she do that? Because she wants to buy me back. What do you mean? The company has been struggling since I left. Some investors have lost confidence. Major clients have cancelled contracts. She needs me back, but she wants me back alone. Helen felt a chill in her stomach. And what does the letter say exactly? Arthur read aloud. The offer is conditional on your return to the company's executive functions and the termination of your current relationship. We believe this is the best solution for all involved. Helen was silent for a long moment. Is it a lot of money? It's a lifetime of money. For you, for me, for Grandma Mary. We would never have to worry about anything again. But you would have to break up with me. Yes. Helen got up and walked to the window. And do you want to accept? What? Helen turned to him. It's a simple question. Do you want to accept the proposal? Arthur stood up and approached her. How can you ask that? Because it's a tempting offer. You would get back everything you lost because of me. I didn't lose anything because of you. You lost your company, your position, your fortune, and I gained you. Arthur took her hands. Helen, do you really think I would consider this proposal? I don't know. Helen looked down. Sometimes. I wonder if you don't regret the choices you made. Look at me. She looked up. The only thing I regret is taking so long to find you. Helen felt tears burn her eyes. Are you sure? Absolutely. And to prove it, Arthur let go of her hands and knelt. Helen's heart stopped. Arthur, what are you doing? He took a small box out of his pocket. Helen Smith, will you marry me? Helen looked at the box, at the man kneeling before her, at the simple but happy life they had built together. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But what if your family doesn't accept? What if the media? Then let them not accept. Let them talk. I choose you, Helen. Every day. Forever. Helen knelt too, bringing herself to his level. Yes. 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 I want to marry you. The kiss that followed was intense, passionate, full of promises for the future. When they parted, Arthur placed the ring on her finger. It was simple, elegant, perfect. It's not a huge diamond, he said. It's perfect, Helen replied, just like us. 3 months later, Helen and Arthur were married in a small, intimate ceremony at the neighborhood church where they lived. Grandma Mary was in the front row, proud and emotional. A few co-workers from both of their jobs were present, as was Marcus, who had left his job at Wellington Holdings to work at Arthur's new company. Notably absent was any member of the Wellington family, but Helen and Arthur didn't care. They had created their own family, chosen and built on love and mutual respect. During the simple but joyful reception in the parish hall, Helen was talking to Grandma Mary when her grandmother made an observation that surprised her. Your mother would be proud. Helen looked at her. Do you really think so? I'm sure of it, because you achieved what she never could. What? True love, reciprocated, and the courage to fight for it. That night, in the small apartment where they would spend their honeymoon, they didn't have money to travel, but they didn't mind. Helen and Arthur talked about the future. Sometimes I wonder if our mothers are watching, Helen said, lying on Arthur's chest. I think so, he replied, stroking her hair, and I think they're happy because we managed to do things differently. Differently? How? Our parents fell in love in an impossible situation, with secrets and lies. We fell in love knowing the whole truth, accepting the consequences, choosing each other despite everything. Helen thought about it. Do you think they really loved each other? I think so. But love isn't enough if it's not accompanied by courage and honesty. And do we have that? Arthur kissed her on the forehead. We do, and we'll keep building it every day. A year after their wedding, Helen graduated from her technical course and started working at Arthur's company, which had grown modestly but solidly. It was a sustainability consulting firm, helping other companies implement responsible environmental practices. It's ironic, Helen said one day, reviewing reports in the small office they shared. You left a giant company to build a company that helps other companies be better. It's not ironic, Arthur replied, looking at her over his computer. It's intentional. I want to leave the world better than I found it. And you're succeeding. We are succeeding. None of this would have happened without you. It was true. Helen had proven to be as effective a business partner as she was a life partner. Her ability to connect with people from all social levels, combined with Arthur's business experience, created a powerful combination. 2 years after their wedding, Helen found out she was pregnant. When she told Arthur, he lifted her into the air and spun around with her in the office, laughing like a child. "A baby," he repeated, amazed. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you excited?" Grandma Mary asked when they told her the news. "We're terrified," Helen said, laughing, "but very happy." "That's how it is," the grandmother said, smiling. "Fear and joy walking together. It's a sign that it's true love." During her pregnancy, Helen often thought of her mother, of how different it would have been if Carmen had lived to meet her grandchild, to see that her daughter had managed to find true love. "Do you think she would approve?" she asked Arthur one night, her hands on her now rounded belly. "I think so, especially because you're happy." "And you? Are you happy?" Arthur pulled her closer. "I'm happier than I ever thought possible." Their daughter, Carmen Helen Wellington Smith, was born on a sunny spring morning. She was small, perfect, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's brown hair. "She's beautiful," Grandma Mary said, holding her great-granddaughter, "just like your mother when she was born." Helen looked at her daughter, at Arthur, at her grandmother, at the life they had built together, and knew that she was finally complete. 5 years later, when Carmen was already running through the house, filling it with laughter and messes, Helen would sometimes stop to reflect on the journey that had brought her there. She and Arthur had faced difficult times, financial problems when the company almost went bankrupt in its second year, malicious comments that still occasionally appeared in the media, pressure from some clients who preferred not to work with the ex-cleaner, but they had faced it all together, supporting each other, growing as people and as a couple. The company now had 15 employees and was expanding to other cities. Helen had gone back to school and was studying business administration at a private college, realizing the dream that had seemed impossible years before. One Friday night, as they were putting Carmen to bed, the little girl asked a question that took her parents by surprise. "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma Beatrice like us?" Helen and Arthur exchanged a look. Beatrice Wellington Montgomery still made occasional comments to the press about how Arthur had squandered the family legacy. "Sometimes people can't understand what they don't know," Helen explained. "Grandma Beatrice doesn't really know us." "But could she get to know us someday?" "Maybe," Arthur said, "if she wants to." "I'd like that," Carmen said, "because family is important." That night, after Carmen fell asleep, Helen and Arthur talked about their daughter's observation. "She's right," Helen said, "about family being important. Are you thinking of trying to contact Beatrice?" "Not exactly. I'm thinking that maybe it's time we stopped hiding." "What do you mean?" Helen turned to him in bed. "I think it's time we told our story. Our way." "A book?" "Why not? Our true story, not the distorted version the media tells." Arthur considered the idea. Would it be a book about second chances? About choices, about courage, about how it's possible to write a different story, even when the past tries to define us. 2 years later, the book Second Chances was released and became a bestseller. Helen and Arthur told their story with brutal honesty, including the mistakes, the fears, the doubts, but also the joy of finding true love. The book changed the public narrative about them. Instead of being seen as a scandal, they came to be seen as an example that love can overcome any obstacle when it's built on a solid foundation. At the book launch party, in a small but charming bookstore in the West Village, Helen gave a speech to an emotional audience. "My mother died chasing an impossible dream," she said. "I was lucky enough to find a possible dream. But the difference wasn't luck. It was choice. The choice not to give up when it got hard. The choice to trust when it was easier to be afraid. The choice to build something new instead of repeating the mistakes of the past." At the end of the night, as they were leaving, an elegant man in his 60s approached them. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm Robert Wellington." Helen and Arthur fell silent, recognizing Arthur's father, whom they hadn't seen in nearly 8 years. I came because I wanted to apologize, Robert continued, to both of you, especially to you, Helen, for the mistakes I made in the past. Helen studied the man who had caused so much pain in her family. He looked older, more fragile, carrying the weight of his own mistakes. Your mother was an extraordinary woman, Robert said. I loved her, but I didn't know how to love her the right way. I didn't have the courage to leave my marriage, but I also didn't have the courage to let her go, and that destroyed her. Yes, Helen said simply. It did. Seeing you two, seeing how you managed to do things differently, made me realize that maybe it's possible to find redemption, even after so long. Arthur looked at his father with a mixture of anger and pity. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm sick, cancer, and because I don't want to die without asking for forgiveness. Helen felt Arthur tense beside her. She took a deep breath and made a decision. I forgive you, she said, not for what you did to me, but for what you did to my mother. And I forgive you because carrying anger is too heavy. Robert started to cry. Thank you. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, Helen continued. It doesn't mean we want you in our lives, it just means we choose not to let your mistake define our future. Robert nodded. I understand, and I respect that. He turned to leave, but Helen called out to him. Robert. He turned back. My mother truly loved you. Despite everything, she loved you. I hope that brings you some peace. When Robert walked away, Arthur took Helen's hand. How can you be so strong? I'm not strong. I just choose what's worth carrying. 10 years after they first met, Helen and Arthur renewed their vows in a larger ceremony, surrounded by friends they had made over the years, co-workers who had become family, and Grandma Mary, now a doting grandmother to Carmen and her younger brother Gabriel. The company had gone national. Helen had graduated with a degree in business administration and was pursuing a master's in sustainability, and they had bought their own house on a quiet street in Brooklyn Heights. During the ceremony, Helen looked at the family they had created, at the life they had built, and felt a deep gratitude. What are you thinking about? Arthur whispered during the exchange of rings. I'm thinking that we made it, she whispered back. Made what? To write a different story. Our own story. Exactly. When the pastor declared them husband and wife again, they kissed under a shower of rose petals, surrounded by applause and cheers of joy. That night, at home, after the children were asleep and Grandma Mary had retired to her room, Helen and Arthur stood on the porch watching the city lights. You know what surprises me the most, Helen said. What? That it was all worth it. Every tear, every fear, every difficult moment, it was all worth it to get here. And you wouldn't change a thing? Helen thought for a moment. I'd change one thing. What? I would have believed in us sooner. I would have trusted that true love always finds a way. Arthur pulled her closer. And now, what's next? Now we keep writing our story, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Forever? Forever. They stood there holding each other, watching the city that had witnessed their journey from the very beginning. A cleaner and a tycoon who fell in love against all odds and chose to fight for that love every single day. Helen thought of her mother, of how different it would have been if Carmen had had the courage to demand more, to not accept crumbs of affection. She thought of Grandma Mary, who had learned to believe in love in her old age. She thought of her children, who would grow up knowing they were the fruit of a true and conscious love. And finally she thought of herself and Arthur, and how they had proven that it is possible to rewrite the past through the choices of the present. I love you, she said. I love you too, he replied, from the first day and forever. And there, on the porch of their home, surrounded by the life they had built together, Helen and Arthur knew they had achieved something their parents never had, a love that chose itself every day, in spite of everything and because of everything. It was the ending they deserved. It was the love worth fighting for.